Mashpachate Ya'o Shar'al B'Matzreim Shane Haram Ya'o Wagam Grame Shalom Lacham Shalom Shalom Galecham Shame Ya'oda Bandor Ha'ret Ba'Mamazrach Ma'aratz Marachak Kol Kor B'Madbar Wahayom Hazah Ratzate Lasapar Ral Vocative expression. Vocative expression. Ho'a na kar'a vocative expression balashon shakar. Ubal ba gabareth ech kar'anu afza. Anachno na kar laha lakar basham. Lakar basham. Bashapa barora. Shemayona che rafa falamado rabim. Virtually all languages have what is called vocative expression, which is simply the means by which a speaker may call to or address someone else. Vocatives may fulfill a variety of different functions, such as to summon attention, to identify the addressee, or to express a particular emotion. For example, in the sentence, I don't know, Bob, the phrase I don't know is set in apposition to the proper noun Bob, which is the vocative in this sentence. Bob is not the direct object of the verb know in this sentence. Bob is the vocative that is being addressed. Another example would be if a woman were to say to her husband, babe, a spider. The noun babe would be the vocative, and the sentence expresses emotion because she is startled by the spider and she is summoning her husband's attention. So what does any of this have to do with biblical Hebrew? A lot. It's going to help us understand Genesis 32 verses 28 and 29 in a new and correct light. V'ya'amar aleo ma shamcha, v'ya'amar ya'o rakab, v'ya'amar la ya'o rakab, ya'amar rod shamcha, che'am ya'o shar'al, che'sharetha ram alaim wa ram anashem wa thochal. And he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Ya'o rakab. And he said, not Ya'o rakab will it be called more your name, but rather Ya'o Shar'al, for you have ruled as a prince with God and with men, and you have prevailed. Now, I am aware of the controversy that I've caused by treating these two names of the patriarch as theophoric names, where the first letter Yud, or Yah as we would call it, is treated as a diminutive form of the tetragrammaton, as opposed to being the Yud prefix indicating a verbal form in the third person imperfect, which is what the standard grammars of biblical Hebrew will tell you. I am disagreeing with the standard grammars here, which have been authored for the most part by European and American scholars and not our own people. But I have not gone against the grain of conventional wisdom without doing the proper research and without making my research available to other scholars to review and to critique. Let's recap and reiterate that vocatives have three basic functions. The first is simply to identify the addressee. Just as in the sentence, I don't know Bob, the speaker is not saying he doesn't know who Bob is. The speaker is addressing Bob and telling him that he does not know something. The second function of a vocative is to predicate some property onto the addressee. In a phrase such as my lord the king, the speaker addresses his lord and predicates that his lord is the king. The third function of a vocative is to activate the addressee, such as by drawing the attention of the addressee to something or by petitioning the addressee for something. This third function of a vocative is what we find in many Afro-Asiatic Semitic names which utilize a theophoric element. To give just two examples from Akkadian theophoric names that are mentioned in the Bible, and I am obligated to preface my remarks with may feces forever be upon these pagan gods, but nonetheless these examples are useful for purely linguistic purposes. In the book of 2 Kings chapter 24 and 1, and in many other places in the scriptures, we come across the royal Babylonian name Nebuchadnezzar. This Akkadian theophoric personal name means, O Nabo, protect my firstborn son. The name utilizes a vocative expression where the deity is addressed by a speaker and then the speaker petitions the deity. In other words, the addressee is being activated by the speaker. In Yoram Ya'o, aka Jeremiah 39 and 3, we come across another Akkadian theophoric name, this time Nergal-Shar-Ezer, or Nergal Shar Utsor. This name means, O Nergal, protect the king. Once again, the vocative is the deity name, and the deity is being activated by the speaker. Now let's look at a Ghabarith personal name. In 2 Kings 23 and 34, we come across the royal name Yaoyakim. Yaoyakim, aka Jehoiakim. This name combines a 3-letter diminutive form of the tetragrammaton with a passive hollow verb in the third person imperfect, which is used as adjective. This name means, O Yao, let him be raised up. The addressee and the vocative in this name is Yao, holy and blessed is he. And the phrase, let him be raised up, is what activates the addressee on behalf of the bearer of the name. Yao Yakim, O Yao, let him, the bearer of the name, be raised up. Let's turn now our attention to the name of the patriarch, his first name, Yaogakab, aka Jacob. I'm not the only scholar to disagree with conventional wisdom as it relates to the etymology of this biblical personal name. Back in the 80s, Ronald S. Hendel pointed out that the name is really a hypochoristic or diminutive form which references the deity name worshipped by the bearer of the name. You can find this information in Hendel's book entitled The Epic of the Patriarch, page 111 and note 34. Where I disagree with this view is that the verbal root of the personal name, the verbal root being rakab, has the definition of protector, according to how this root is defined in Ethiopic and South Arabian. Protector does not really fit the story of the manner in which the patriarch was born, grabbing onto the heel of his older twin brother. This root, rakab, in biblical Hebrew means to supplant or to overpower. It also means to displace or to supersede, but not protect. Verb, subject, object is not the exclusive word order in ancient Hebrew. So a personal name where the subject precedes the verb is not in conflict with any of the diachronic aspects of biblical Hebrew onomastics, which is simply the study of names. The reason why this name is pronounced Yaakov by Jews is because at a much later phase of the language, during the Greek period in the 3rd century BC, Jewish converts in Egypt who required a translation of the 5 books of Moses into their mother tongue of Greek were pronouncing theophoric names in a way that deliberately obscured the theophoric element in these names, perhaps in order to prevent the divine name from being misused by strangers. The Greek translation is not definitive evidence of how ancient Hebrew was genuinely pronounced by bloodline Hebrews. It provides, at best, some evidence of how the language of Hebrew was being spoken by Jewish converts in Alexandria, Egypt, but not in the Holy Land. A very clear example of this is the personal name Yaoho, aka Jehu, which is indisputably a theophoric name where the first letter is a diminutive form of the divine name, followed by the third person masculine singular pronoun he. The name Yaoho means Yao is he, or Yao exists. However, in the Greek rendition of this name, the letters iota, omicron, and upsilon are used, which gives the pronunciation you. This rendering effectively removes and eliminates the theophoric element in the Hebrew name. We also know that by this time, which is very late in the history of the language, an O-class vowel was inserted between the second and third radicals of the root verb in the G-stem of the imperfect forms for irregular verbs that have a guttural consonant as the first radical. There is no reason a priori to assume that this vowel insertion was a feature of the earliest phase of the language, therefore we have removed it. It is true Greek does not possess a medial H consonant, but we know the Greek letter chi was used as a substitute for this phoneme. My position is that of A.E. Cowley. In ancient Hebrew, this phoneme was only a consonant in the word initial position and the initial of a suffix. It was a silent vowel placeholder in the medial position. But if the Greek evidence is not conclusive for determining how ancient Hebrew words and names were actually pronounced, How is it that I can be so adamant and so certain that the Dead Sea Scroll fragment 4Q120, dated to the 1st century BC, establishes beyond any shadow of a doubt that Yah-O is the only correct way to pronounce the Tetragrammaton? It's because this pronunciation is in fact much, much older than the Greek period. It is consistent with all of the ancient phonetic transcriptions of the Tetragrammaton that were produced before the Greek period. It is attested in Demotic in the 4th century BC. It is attested in the Elephantine Aramaic papyri of the 5th century BC. It is attested in the Akkadian cuneiform in Assyria in the 8th century BC. It is attested in hieroglyphics in the Soleb inscription in Nubia in the 14th century BC. This is so many centuries before the Greek period, it would be absurd to say that the pronunciation Yah-O is Greek. It is not Greek. Listen to me carefully. His name is Yah-O. Always was, always will be. So what of the name Yah-O-Gakab? What does it mean? In form, it may look like an imperfect finite verb that is not followed by any subject. But the name does not have to be interpreted as such given the context of the patriarch's birth narrative in Genesis chapter 25, verses 24 to 26. The name can be a terse verbal sentence where the subject precedes the verb and the meaning is Yah-O has supplanted. However, since the patriarch and his older twin brother were unconsciously struggling with each other in their mother's womb, and the younger came out with his hand clenched to his brother's heel, the sight of this spectacle suggests a name that fits the grammatical structure of a vocative expression where the deity is addressed and activated by an imperative verb. O Yah-O, supplant. It is Yah-O, not the patriarch himself, who has determined that the younger twin will supersede and surpass the older twin, and it is Yah-O who will bring this to pass. The Patriarch's name is attested as far back as the 17th century BC. It was the name of a pharaoh who reigned in Egypt during the Second Intermediate Period. His name is West Semitic. Even though it is written in hieroglyphics, it is not an Egyptian name. In form, the name looks like it could be an imperfect verb followed by the subject of the verb. That or it could be a jussive, since the jussive had no overhanging vowel ending in early West Semitic just as in Arabic. But these cannot be accepted since they are problematic and they lead to absurdities. The name is rendered with the double reed glyph, which represents the West Semitic glide consonant Y. This is followed by the West Semitic verb rakab, which is written with the fricative guttural consonant, so this is not a vowel. And then lastly, there is the har element, which is the common West Semitic word for mountain. This element is not the name of a deity, nor is it the name of a person. In the literature, you will see this name rendered in such a way that the pronunciation is Yaqub Har, which takes its cue from the very late Masoretic spelling of the name Jacob, which inserts a long vowel between the second and the third radicals of the root verb. If we construe and translate this name as an imperfect verb followed by the subject, then we end up with a mountain will supplant. Or if we take it as a jussive, we get may a mountain supplant, neither of which make any grammatical sense. But if we look at the name as being a vocative expression, then it makes sense. The double reed is simply a diminutive spelling of a deity name. The verb rakab is an imperative, and the har element is the object of the verb. The name means, O deity, circumvent a mountain. We come now to the most important of the patriarch's two names, his second name, which was given to him by the angel, and which we pronounce as Ya'oshar-al, and not Israel, Yisrael, Yisroel, Yasharala or Yasharal, and the like. First, a quick word about the second letter in the spelling of the name. The sibilant SH phoneme began to be pronounced incorrectly as a voiceless lateral fricative S by Hebrews in the Transjordan region towards the end of the 12th century BC. The evidence for this comes from the book of Judges, chapter 12, verse 6. Since the Shah phoneme, as we call it, did not represent more than one sound until very, very late in the history of Hebrew, we retain this phoneme's original sound value. If you look at what the standard biblical Hebrew grammars say about this name, you will find definitions which treat the name as an imperfect verb form with the noun el, meaning God, as the subject of the verb shara. If this is correct, then the meaning of the name is God persevereth, or the jussive let God persevereth. As I pointed out in my article on the etymology of the name Israel, which is available online, these choices do not fit the context of the story in Genesis 32. The name is supposed to say something about the patriarch and be a blessing upon him. Giving him a name that means God persevereth when God actually does no such thing makes no sense. God does not persevere, since nothing he does is with difficulty that he has to somehow struggle to overcome. Since that definition of the name does not fit any way you look at it, the alternative is to see that the new name given to the patriarch essentially means that he is a prince of the god Yahweh. But this information is conveyed in the form of a vocative expression. O Yahweh, a prince of God. The deity is addressed, and his attention is summoned to take note of the fact that Yahuwah has been blessed to become his prince. The name combines a single letter diminutive form of the tetragrammaton with a nominal phrase Shar-al, which means prince of God. This definition of the name as a theophoric name and a vocative expression fits what the prophet Hoshai has to say about the patriarch in Hoshai chapter 12 and verse 3. Babatan rakab ath acheo, waba'ono shara ath alaim. In the womb he supplanted his brother, and by his strength he exercised power as a prince with God. It is clear from this statement that the new name of the patriarch is supposed to say something about him, not the God he worships. By the time we get to the Greek period, the name Yahushar'al was normalized and Grecianized into
Strong's G 2474, Israel, Israel.
And we've been stuck with that ever since. That is, until now.